The hum of the engines filled the quiet, but it wasn't enough to drown the weight pressing against the cabin walls. She sat still, her eyes fixed on the window. The glass reflected her calm face, though her chest rose with shallow, measured breaths. Across the aisle, the man shifted uncomfortably in his new seat. His voice, once loud and commanding, was gone. He cleared his throat, but the sound only drew more stares. A woman whispered behind her hand. A man coughed sharply, then looked away. "I didn't mean—" His words came soft, almost broken, but no one answered. The silence grew tighter, stretching around them like a net. He glanced at the flight attendants, but they avoided his eyes. Their smiles from earlier had thinned into polite masks. She lowered her phone onto her lap. The recording light blinked. Her thumb hovered, then pressed stop. Not a word left her lips, yet the quiet spoke for her. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Why is he sitting back here now?" The mother hushed him, shaking her head, but the question lingered. Echoing louder than the engines, he leaned forward, whispering to no one. "It was just a seat." Her head turned only slightly, just enough for him to see her eyes, calm, unflinching. She didn't need to answer. The silence held her truth. A ripple moved through the cabin, not laughter, not outrage, just a heavy awareness. The man sank deeper into his chair. His hands, once steady, fidgeted with the armrest. She looked away, back to the clouds. In that silence, dignity held its ground. Her hands smoothed the armrest, careful, calm. She had earned this seat, but the stares made it feel borrowed. The man across the aisle leaned forward, his voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet. "This must be a mistake." She lifted her eyes slowly, meeting his without flinching. "Excuse me?" "You don't belong here," he said, softer now but firm, as though speaking truth instead of insult. "These seats aren't for—" He stopped, the words choking themselves before fully leaving. The attendant froze mid-step. Passengers turned, some curious, some uncomfortable. Nobody spoke. The silence let the insult stretch wider. Her chest rose, controlled, steady. "My ticket says otherwise." She slid it onto the tray, the gold lettering clear, undeniable. He let out a laugh, short and bitter. "Money doesn't buy class." The words hit harder than his stare. For a moment, she thought of her grandmother's stories, bus rides where seats were snatched, doors shut in faces. Those echoes lived here too, in his tone. The attendant cleared her throat. "Sir, please sit down." But even she hesitated, her gaze flicking nervously between them. The young woman whispered almost to herself, "Still the same fight." He heard her. "What's that supposed to mean?" Her voice didn't rise. "It means I've seen this scene before. You just changed the setting." A ripple of unease moved through the cabin. Someone shifted, another coughed. The man leaned back, but his smirk faltered. She looked ahead, her silence saying more than his anger. The plane hadn't moved, yet the ground beneath him felt unsteady. He reached for the boarding pass again, fingers brushing it as if it were trash. "Cute," he muttered, tossing it back toward her tray. "Anybody could print that." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't move. Around them, the cabin's air shifted. A couple of attendants stepped closer, their expressions unreadable, but their posture leaned toward him. One even forced a small smile, as though his disbelief carried weight. "Sir," one attendant said gently, "please, let us handle this." Her voice carried the tone of siding with the customer who looked like him. He leaned back, spreading into the seat like it was his throne. "See, even they know something's off. She probably sneaked up here from the back." The words landed like blows. She felt them, sharp and deliberate, meant to erase her presence. Still, she held steady. "I paid for this seat. The receipt is in my email if you'd like to check." He smirked, looking at the attendants. "You really buying that?" "Come on." The attendants hesitated. Silence again, but heavy this time. Complicit silence. A few passengers averted their eyes, not wanting to step in, not wanting to risk discomfort. Her voice cracked, soft but cutting through the tension. "You don't see me." "You see a story you've told yourself?" The smirk faltered. For the first time, his confidence trembled. But before he could respond, another passenger pulled out a phone, camera lifted. That small act shifted the air. A warning, a witness. She straightened in her seat, her silence louder now than his arrogance. And though the attendant still lingered near him, the balance was changing, slowly, visibly, one uncomfortable glance at a time. His laughter came sharp, forced, like he needed others to join in. "She's stubborn, I'll give her that," he muttered, glancing toward the attendants as though waiting for validation. None came. Their eyes flickered, restless, torn between protocol and prejudice. Her gaze didn't move. She sat straighter, shoulders unshaken. "The seat is mine." "Check again." The words weren't loud, but they landed heavy. Her tone cut through his noise, slicing at the false authority he carried like armor. Silence followed, an unbearable pause that made even those in nearby rows shift uncomfortably. One attendant hesitated, finally reaching for the scanner. The device beeped, confirming what she had already known. The seat was hers. Facts had spoken. Yet the air remained hostile, charged with something deeper than proof. He scoffed, leaning back with false composure. "Machines make mistakes." But the words rang hollow. His confidence cracked. She whispered more than spoke. "The only mistake is thinking I don't belong here." His jaw tightened. For the first time, his stare wavered. Around them, quiet eyes took note, some guilty, some relieved. A woman 2 rows back lowered her phone discreetly, still recording. Her calmness unsettled him more than anger ever could. His arrogance had thrived on resistance, but her restraint left him exposed. It was dignity against disrespect, silence against noise. The attendant, cheeks flushed, finally turned toward him. "Sir, the seat is hers. Please respect that." The firmness was subtle but undeniable. He didn't answer. Instead, he shifted in his chair, a flicker of collapse hiding behind narrowed eyes. She remained still, breathing steady, her silence the loudest truth in the room. The battle wasn't over, but the ground beneath him was beginning to crumble. The murmurs swelled, soft but sharp, like needles slipping through fabric. Maybe she moved up here. Why's she making this a scene? Voices dipped when she turned her head, but the weight of their judgment pressed in from every angle. A flight attendant shifted uneasily, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am, perhaps if you wait, we can—" Her reply was steady, unbroken. "No, I'm not moving." The calmness unsettled more than anger could have. She didn't plead, didn't raise her voice. She simply sat, her eyes fixed forward as though she already knew how this story would end. The man beside her leaned forward, his tone smug but cracking. "You're dragging this out for nothing. They'll put you back where you belong." She didn't glance at him. "I am where I belong." The words landed like a quiet gavel. Around them, silence grew heavier. The crew hesitated, torn between siding with the loudest voice and facing the truth written in her composure. A young passenger across the aisle whispered to his mother, "Why's she so calm?" The mother shushed him quickly, but her own gaze lingered with unease. Her stillness was no longer submission, it was warning. Every second she refused to shrink made the arrogance beside her shrink instead, and though most passengers didn't yet grasp it, something was shifting. His smirk faltered, his fingers tapped nervously against the armrest. The attendants avoided his eye. The cabin had been his stage, but now he was shrinking under the quiet weight of her dignity. She didn't move, didn't break. Just a woman in her rightful seat, yet carrying the kind of silence that promised the ground beneath arrogance was about to split. The hum of the engines felt louder than it should have, pressing against her chest as she sat stiffly in her stolen seat. She didn't fight back. Not yet, because silence was something she had been trained to carry. Her mind, however, would not sit still. It wandered uninvited to rooms that looked nothing like this one yet felt the same. "I don't think this is your seat," she had said softly before. The man hadn't even looked up, just shifted his shoulder, as if her presence were an inconvenience. That dismissal sent her spiraling into older echoes. Boardrooms where men leaned back in polished leather, smirking. "Are you sure you're qualified for this position?" Their voices, dripping with doubt, lingered like the taste of metal. She had smiled back then, holding her ground. Though her chest had burned the same way it did now, classrooms followed, chalk dust in the air. Her hand raised, answers sharp, yet teachers tilted their heads with polite disbelief. Maybe someone else can try. The sting of being erased had trained her tongue to swallow truth, the same way she swallowed it here. And then, banks. Smooth-talking clerks with fixed smiles and rehearsed refusals. Unfortunately, we can't approve your request at this time. As if her ambition were a threat, as if her dreams required permission. The turbulence shook lightly, but it was her memory that rattled hardest. Each recollection pressed weight against her chest, reminding her that injustice had never needed raised voices to cut deep. The man beside her sighed, tapping his armrest like the seat was always his. She turned her gaze to the aisle, lips closed, dignity intact. Yet inside, history whispered cruelly, "It never ends." A cough broke the steady drone of the cabin. She didn't turn her head, but she felt it. The shift. Eyes. Not many, but enough. A man across the aisle whispered low, "They never question men like him." His voice wasn't meant for her, but it slid under her skin like a blade. She let her gaze rest forward, chin lifted. The seatbelt sign glowed, trapping her in silence. The passenger beside her chuckled under his breath. "Guess the world still knows its order," he muttered, more to himself than to her. The words hung in the stale air, sharp, ugly. From the back, a woman leaned toward her husband, speaking softly, "Don't get involved. It's not worth it." The man nodded, folding his arms, settling deeper into his seat. Their avoidance stung worse than open laughter. Another voice, a teenager this time, whispered, "Why doesn't she fight him for it?" His mother hushed him, shaking her head quickly, eyes darting toward her, then away. She pressed her palms flat against her knees, forcing them still. Dignity was a decision, and tonight it was costing her everything. Inside, she wanted to scream, to demand the truth aloud. "Why do you see me and still choose silence?" But she swallowed it down, remembering all the times silence was chosen over her dignity. The man in her seat stretched lazily, elbows widening. "Comfortable," he said, smug, not even looking her way, and yet it wasn't just him. It was the quiet around him, the easy acceptance, the passengers who glanced but looked away. That silence roared louder than his arrogance ever could. She breathed slowly, chest rising, refusing to break. And still, the whispers kept cutting, carving her place into absence. The attendant bent slightly, her smile tight, rehearsed. "It's just policy, miss. Please don't make it harder." The words were soft, but they sliced deeper than the man's smugness. The passenger shifted in the stolen seat, smirking like the rules were written for him. He didn't even glance at her, only leaned back further, stretching as though her existence was the inconvenience. "Policy," she repeated, her voice steady but low. "That's what they always call it, isn't it?" The attendant hesitated, fingers tightening on the service cart. "I don't make the rules, I need you to understand." "Understand what?" Her question lingered, quiet but heavy. "That some people get comfort while others get silence?" The attendant swallowed, glancing at the other passengers. "Please, don't cause a scene," the man chuckled under his breath. "She's already causing one by standing here." Her jaw locked, but her hand stayed calm in her lap. The humiliation wasn't new. She remembered banks, schools, meetings, always the same tone, the same shield of rules. Rules that bent for others, but cut into her like glass. "You know," she said, her words measured, "policy never seems to fall on the ones sitting in stolen seats." The attendant blinked, lips parting, but no answer came. The silence pressed heavier than any explanation. Behind them, a woman muttered, "She's right." It was quiet, almost swallowed by the hum of the engines, but it landed. The attendant's smile faltered, just a crack, as though the uniform could no longer shield the weight of complicity. She turned her eyes back to the aisle, refusing to let tears betray her dignity. The rules had spoken, but so had her silence. The man's voice rose, sharp and restless. "Are you deaf?" I said, "Get up. You don't belong here." His words struck like thrown stones, but she didn't flinch. Her hands moved with deliberate calm, slipping into her purse. The soft click of her phone unlocking was louder than his shouting. She didn't look at him, nor at the attendant hovering with unease. She simply dialed. "Who are you calling?" he barked, irritation dripping from his grin. The passengers leaned closer, curious, unsettled. The hum of the engines felt quieter, the air heavier. "Ground control," she said evenly, pressing the phone to her ear. Her voice carried a certainty that silenced whispers. "We'll need to ground this flight." The words cut through the cabin like steel. The man laughed, forced, shaky. "You're bluffing. You think anyone's listening to you?" Her gaze lifted for the first time, locking onto his. It wasn't anger she held. It was patience sharpened by years of dismissal. "They always listen," she replied. The attendant froze, eyes darting between them. "Ma'am, maybe that isn't—" But her words trailed off as the woman on the phone spoke back. Passengers caught only fragments, but enough. "Authorization. Immediate hold. Remain seated." The man's smirk faltered. His jaw clenched as if the walls had closed in. For once, his words deserted him. The silence spread row by row, faces turning not toward him, but his lips trembled, reaching for a defense that refused to come. I didn't mean—" She didn't flinch. Her voice slipped through the cabin like glass breaking softly. "You never needed to." The words landed heavier than rage ever could. The hush that followed felt endless, as though every breath in the cabin was waiting to see if he'd rise or crumble. He looked down, the weight of eyes pressing him smaller than his own shadow. A passenger whispered, "That's it." Another leaned back slowly, as if justice had already been sealed in the silence. The attendant's clipboard lowered, her stance softening. For once, authority bent toward quiet dignity rather than force. Her gaze brushed over the woman's calm face, then toward the man's hollowed one. Regret flickered across her features, faint but visible, a silent acknowledgement of the wrong she had allowed. Narration seeped into the stillness. No gavel was struck, no verdict announced. Yet the trial ended there, not in noise, but in the collapse of entitlement that could no longer stand. The man finally whispered, almost to himself, "I shouldn't have—" The words trailed off, unfinished, swallowed by shame. She gave him nothing further. No stare, no gesture. Dignity did not need to linger on victory. It existed beyond the wreckage of his pride. The cabin breathed again, passengers shifting as though freed from an unseen hold. No applause came, no outward celebration. Justice revealed itself not in spectacle, but in the still weight of truth no one could deny. Her silence closed the moment. And in that silence, the world inside that plane understood. Arrogance ends loudly, but dignity speaks once and lasts. He shuffled down the narrow aisle, the same aisle he once claimed with arrogance. Now every step dragged like chains. Whispers trailed him, not loud, not cruel, but enough to burn. He tried not to meet their eyes, yet every glance reminded him of what had just broken. The attendant gestured stiffly toward an empty coach seat. Her smile strained, a weak attempt to patch the wound left earlier. "Here, sir," his reply barely carried. "Don't call me sir." The word surprised even him, brittle and collapsing. He lowered himself into the seat, slumped and cornered, his hands twisting against each other. Silence wrapped around him, but it wasn't mercy. It was judgment delivered without sound, heavier than any insult. Across the cabin, someone whispered, "That's what dignity looks like." Another muttered, "And that's what happens to arrogance." He heard it all. Every syllable pierced sharper because no one shouted, no one mocked. The restraint itself cut deeper. Narration hung in the still air. No trial, no gavel, no law. Yet the verdict stood. His privilege had been dragged down, not by force, but by quiet truth witnessed by all. He leaned forward, covering his face with one hand. His voice cracked, almost childlike. "I just wanted respect," but no answer came. Respect had already been given, just not to him. The woman he wronged didn't turn to look back. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke more than victory. It spoke permanence. He sat in coach, invisible now, swallowed by the very quiet he once thought belonged to others. The sentence was not years or fines. It was the silence itself, and it would follow him long after landing. The glow of screens lit the cabin before the plane even touched the ground. Passengers, still shaken, had their phones angled low, discreet yet deliberate. Every whisper, every tremble in his voice, every moment of his collapse, it was all there, already stitched into the fabric of the internet. By the time he stepped off, his name was no longer his own. "That's him," someone muttered in the terminal, eyes flicking toward the man who once demanded respect. He pulled his cap lower, but it was useless. "Delete it," he begged one passenger quietly, his voice stripped of command. The woman shook her head. "Truth doesn't get deleted." Narration carried the weight. Justice did not roar this time. It traveled silently, carried in clips replayed on screens, shared in comments that cut deeper than any courtroom judgment. By nightfall, his face was everywhere. Headlines didn't scream. They simply showed the video, and the silence around him grew thicker. Old complaints, once buried, surfaced again, dragged out by those who recognized the same arrogance. His phone buzzed endlessly, missed calls, unread messages, institutions distancing themselves with careful, polished words. Effective immediately, "We do not condone," the phrases stacked like bricks, walling him in. At home, neighbors glanced through curtains, conversations hushed when he passed. Not hatred, not threats, just erasure. The same erasure he had tried to impose now folded back onto him. He stared at his reflection in the darkened screen of his own phone, lips trembling. It wasn't supposed to end like this, but it had, and no one needed to raise their voice. Justice had already been delivered, quietly, carried by screens into every living room. She rested her head against the cool glass, the hum of the engines steady beneath her. Notifications lit her phone, headline after headline, her name tied to words like strength and grace. Yet she didn't smile. She only scrolled slowly, absorbing the world's gaze with quiet detachment. The passenger beside her whispered, almost afraid to disturb the calm. "Ma'am, the way you handled that—" It was powerful. She turned slightly, eyes soft but firm. "I didn't handle him. I handled myself." Silence stretched, and the truth of her words lingered heavier than any applause. Outside, the clouds parted, sunlight spilling into the cabin as if the sky itself acknowledged her endurance. Narration settled gently. Dignity, once challenged, had not just survived, it had risen, untouchable. Her phone buzzed again. A message from a colleague read, "You've become a symbol." She locked the screen, set it face down, and whispered to herself, "Symbols don't bleed." "But I do." A deep breath steadied her. She wasn't thinking of viral videos or hashtags. She thought of the little girl she once was, sitting silently in classrooms where her voice was dismissed, where her presence was questioned. That little girl had finally been answered, not with rage, but with composure. The flight attendant approached hesitantly, her tone softer now. "Can I get you anything? Water? Tea?" She met the woman's eyes. "Just respect. That's enough." The attendant nodded, retreating, her own face clouded with quiet shame. As the plane cut through the sky, she closed her eyes, not in exhaustion, but in release. Narration whispered one final truth. Dignity doesn't ask permission, doesn't wait for approval. It simply flies.